Hello, AJ. How are you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm good, Jens. Thanks for having me here.
It's a pleasure to have you. I'm really interested in a lot of things you're doing. There's so much innovation stuff going on in your world. So, looking forward to the interview. I want to start different than I do normally. Of course, we will introduce yourself, but before we go introducing yourself, what is your first memory in your life? What is the first thing you can remember?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think one of my first memories is playing around with my grandparents or great grandparent. I remember them holding me in their arms and kind of like looking around the room and just feeling all that love.
That's good. How do you remember that? Are you taking notes? How do you document things for yourself to remember things?
Memory is a really interesting phenomenon, and it's hard to say whether or not I remember that in my head or it's because of a photograph that I
Yeah.
saw
Yeah.
or something. But I've always been really interested in recording memories and having them really well organized so that you can access them whenever you want to and whenever you need to.
So, how do you sort your memory? What is your memory bank?
It definitely evolves over time. And one of the great things about what I do now is that I get to focus exclusively on the best ways of preserving memory in my day-to-day job. But growing up, I always was taking pictures, putting them, organizing them in folders, saving them onto hard drives, external hard drives, backing them up, and always finding ways that made it easier to store them so you could have more of it, but also in a way that's really accessible so that, you were thinking, you asked me about my earliest memory. Maybe it's possible for me to actually pull up a photograph that represents that with the click of a button.
Yeah.
So always thinking about that. So started off with photos, and over the last 5 years, really have gotten into audio, voice, and text as really awesome ways to record memory. And thanks to my brother, actually, who always grew up more interested in writing than me, we started doing a lot of writing together, and I realized the power that writing has to hold memory in the words themselves.
Yeah. I'm super crap in writing. I still try to find a solution that gets me into writing stuff, but I'm like you, it's like putting things now into video or voice or trying to do kind of just keywords and of course photos. Photos is one of the best invention, at least in my eyes, to keep memories. Let's go into your backstory. So give us a little bit of understanding and the listeners who you are and how you grew up and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison. I always was really interested in business, and I've always wanted to build something, and I used to tinker around a lot with computers and take them apart and think about how you could make them faster and adding more memory to them. So like I would put RAM chips in them. I always had this fascination with memory, even from like a technical level, because it made the computers work faster and you could do more stuff when you have more memory. So all that to say, I thought that business was something that I could sort of learn in the real world after school. And so I decided to go into industrial engineering and got a degree in that, which I really love. It's a way to think about the world in terms of systems and processes and how to improve things and a mindset of continuous improvement. And after college, I went into a training program at a commercial private bank in Chicago. I worked there for 3 years, and I was in the innovation banking group. So we lended money to technology businesses, mostly software businesses that had recurring revenue models. And it was such a great opportunity to learn about the world of commerce, the world of finance, accounting, how all these various businesses operate, what their products are, how their management teams look like, and what they're doing to build for the future. So that was a really awesome experience and background just out of college. And after 3 years, I decided to team up with my brother, who was just finishing up a PhD in English. So we go way back in our collaboration. He's obviously interested in a different academic approach than I, but we've always thought about how our worlds collide and sort of like the intersection of math, science, humanities, technology. And we set out to help people tell their stories and become authors of their own lives, have better access to their own memory, their own stories, and the stories of their loved ones. And so we started doing that about 4.5 years ago, working with clients one at a time. And we'd write like full books, couple 100-page books, memoirs, biographies. Sometimes they're someone that wants to tell the story of their entire life looking back. Sometimes it's just about a specific episode, or maybe someone that survived something or built a business. And we've done all types of different books and stories, published probably 30 books over this period, and have had a lot of fun doing it and have learned a lot about storytelling and writing and helping people become authors. And we always kind of set out wanting this to be accessible and available to as many people as possible, because we saw how important it was for our own lives. And we've always, every day we're thinking about how can we make this better? How can we make the experience better for people, more fun, more exciting, faster, cheaper, etc. And over time, we've developed a platform that gives people the tools to tell their own story, which we're actually launching in a couple of weeks here, December 15th.
Yes, and we go deeper into that. But before we do that, I want to learn more about Aaron. So, how is it to work with your brother? I just can't imagine that in my eyes. Like me working with my brother, we would be killing each other after a week latest. So, how does it work for you two?
Yeah, it's really an interesting relationship, and we learn so much from each other, and it works because we don't step on each other's toes. We understand that we both have our own specialty and expertise, and it's not always the easiest thing, but we've found ways over time to be much better partners working together. Just one kind of funny anecdote is when we first began working together, we would sit across from each other at a table like every morning, 7:30 a.m. We'd get there and we'd be working and talking. And after a couple of months of that, like it was just too close. And so just having a little bit of distance goes a long way, and just finding barriers between work and life, and understanding that no matter what happens with business, at the end of the day, we're always brothers, and we can't let anything professional or business get in the middle or get in between that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I still can't imagine doing that with my brother. No, but it's really cool. The good thing of that is, of course, like you said, you know each other so deeply so that you don't need to talk to each other. When you talk to others, you always try to figure out, but with family members, you know how they think, you know what's going on. And sometimes you just need to look at the other person and say, yo, maybe I was wrong right now.
For sure. Yep. We definitely are able to understand each other with a lot fewer words, but I guess that's a double-edged sword, because sometimes you might overanalyze what you think they're thinking, but we have pretty good communication.
Is he similar to you into documenting life and the same topics, or is he the opposite?
I think he is. Yeah, he's like I said before, he was more at it from sort of the writing angle. I think he's got stacks of legal pad journals that he's recorded over the years, and for me, I'm more photograph, and also I love writing now, and I do a lot of it, and I do write with my hand, but I usually digitize it pretty quickly and then throw out the paper. So we're a little bit different from that perspective.
Yeah, when it comes to journaling, I'm always scared. If I'm writing a lot of notes on podcasts and business meetings and so on, which is all in hand, but I'm almost a little scared if I would write down everything what I'm thinking in a physical way that someone might find and read it, then I was like, oh, I'm not sure if I want anyone to read that or
Yeah.
find it. So that's
Yep.
I'm scared when it comes to that.
For sure. And that's actually something that we built into our platform, is that it's private by default. So every note, every story that you create starts off with just you as the author and audience. No one else can see it. And you invite people in over time because of that, because ideas need space to grow. You need space to reflect and think about things. And the way that a lot of platforms are set up now, like Twitter, Instagram, the only option is to publish immediately. And
Yeah.
so we offer that space for people to be private.
Yeah, that's awesome. Before we go into Biograph, let's talk a little bit more about the book project you do. So you mentioned already that you help people documenting their life and build biographies or memoirs. Tell us a little bit about the process. So how does it work? There's a person, let's say, my imaginary grandfather has had an amazing life and want to write that down in a book style. How would you approach that?
That's a great question. And what we've learned over time is that there are so many different methods and ways of approaching it. And we kind of have a few tried and true methods, but every single person has a different vision for how they want the process to look and how they want the product to work, or how they want the product to look. And so we're always mindful of that and accommodating people in the way that they want to tell their story. But generally speaking, we interview people just like you are interviewing me. We have interview guides that kind of draw the story out of them, we share with them beforehand, and then they can modify the questions. And we do a lot of the writing through voice and through speaking. We found that a lot of people don't like writing, or they don't think they do. They don't understand it. They don't want to be sitting at a keyboard. It just turns them off, but they are interested in telling their story. And so we found that almost everybody's a really good storyteller using their voice. And so we record our interviews, we transcribe them, and then we kind of use that as like the marble block for the actual manuscript and the narrative. And most of the writing that we do is sort of refining that and reducing it, kind of chiseling the marble block and not putting words in people's mouth, but really letting their voice speak, and also making it as concise as possible and taking out all of the extra language that we speak out on the fly. So that's like the first part of it. And it's also very collaborative, where we interview multiple people for a lot of books. So, use your grandfather, for instance. Maybe his grandkids want to contribute stories or have things to say about it, or the kids do. Or maybe he's got some friends or business partners, and we take all of these things into account, interview all of them, and interweave those together into the narrative. And next, we usually it depends on what kind of book someone wants, but sometimes it's a coffee table book. Sometimes it's more of like a novel style book. But oftentimes we gather a lot of pictures and organize those into the manuscript. We design the books ourselves in-house, and then we print them. And sometimes, we started off this business really just thinking they were private books for the most part, that people wanted to keep within a family or a close circle. And more people over time wanted to publish their stories. So we created our own publishing imprint, Biograph, and a lot of what we do is now published and sold.
Yeah. When you do this, do you look as well into, because I've seen it when I did the research, that you have done it as well with younger people. So not just the obvious for a lot of people is, hey, there's a person who has lived an amazing life, super successful, and they're now plus 60, plus 50, and they're writing their memoirs or want to write. But I've seen you have had as well a couple of younger clients where you did that. Do you then take the digital ecosystem as part of your research and documentary input as well?
So that's one of the biggest misconceptions that we've been up against since we started this, is that people think that storytelling is something that you do at the end of your life, looking back. And we really see it as a forward-looking act, something that you should be doing every day, telling your story, writing down your plans and what you want to do, and creating your story as you go. And so we have had a lot of great young authors that are generally entrepreneurial people that are, they're advancing their career with a book, or they're sharing a story that they think could help other people. And so the app that we built lends itself to this more of a lifestyle practice where you are telling your story on an ongoing basis. And at any point in time, you might want to create a book or do something different with all these kind of scattered notes or journals that you've kept, but that the best stories are told in real time. And one great example of that is one of the books that we created. This is a biography for a guy when he was 93. I think we started the project, but he had written weekly letters to his family starting in the 1970s. So he had
Wow.
50 years of weekly letters. So we started the project with 2,500 contemporaneous letters. And one of the greatest books we've ever written, because instead of him trying to remember what went on in 1982 or whenever, we have the actual story from that particular moment.
That's awesome. I mentioned that to you when we talked last time. I do a practice where I send emails to my daughter, and she
Yeah.
just got 5 this week, so she's not having it. I have created an email account when she was 0, and I'm sending her like pictures and a couple of emails per month, which is similar. It's just more a digital version, but it's way more detailed because in a year from now, I don't remember that she was angry this morning at me and because of whatever, or something was broken, or we did this and this and this. Of course, you always remember certain times and certain situations, but that's more broader rather than if you do this on a weekly base and document it on the go, then you have more detailed nuances in it, I'm pretty sure.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. Yeah.
It's super fascinating because a lot of people, when you look into authors and so on, they're documenting. A lot of people doing like journaling every morning, and there are different techniques about that, but it's often with a different intent. So some are just doing that to get a free mind, to get the work started. There are different practice to do that, which works. I've done it a couple of times, but then you're not documenting what you're doing. Then it's more about how do you use a technique to get your mind working. It's fascinating how we use that even more as well, because it trains you in different ways. One part is you training yourself to document, the other part is you training yourself to remember not just the good things, but as well the bad things, and then trying to analyze what's wrong, what's right, how you think about certain things. And sometimes, at least what I find for myself, when I do this in video, I'm speaking to myself, it's like, holy crap, you're very negative about this thing.
Yeah, certainly. And putting things down onto paper. And, I think that's a great point, to use writing as a tool to clear your head, because I think oftentimes people have so many ideas floating around in their head, and that's what creates anxiety when you don't know what to do next. And putting it down on paper offloads that burden and allows you to think more logically or methodically and see, what actually matters, what do I need to attack first. And that's a huge power of writing. And there are so many applications to it, like you said. And it's really one thing that the first question that we ask, you talk about like the process of book writing, that we ask everybody is, what is your intention and who is your audience? Because there's so many different reasons for writing, for telling stories. And so the faster or the sooner that you can figure that out, then pretty much everything flows from there.
Yeah. How did you go from we're writing books and helping people to document their life towards the platform and the app you're launching in the next couple of weeks?
To an outsider, it might seem like they're disconnected concepts, but it is the continuity is almost indistinguishable for us internally at the company. And we really have just started off with this idea of wanting to help people author their own lives, and continuously found ways to make that easier and better. Like I mentioned before, we realized the power of voice to text. So that was like one of the main things that we wanted to, instead of recording an interview and then us going back to the lab and doing that
Yeah.
ourselves, we said, hey, let's give this to people. Oftentimes when we made books, people wanted the raw audio files, and that was like one of their favorite parts of the process, was listening to interviews. So let's give that to them. Let's make that more accessible for them. people want to be able to search for things. So transcribing everything and making it searchable makes that much more accessible. This other concept of telling your story moment by moment or episodically. And if we have a 1 hour interview to tell your story, it's like, oh, I have to put on my suit and tell my
Yeah.
story, and that's it. And it's a terrible feeling. And we saw that over and over again, that people felt pressured that like this was their only shot. And oftentimes they would call us, later that night and say, hey, I wanted to add this, or I forgot about that. So we created a tool to make that possible, where we didn't have to be the one answering the phone. You have the tools yourself to constantly be creating. And then another big piece of the app, it's anchored by visual. So you take a photo or a video and then add audio on top of that, or narration. And we've found time and again that a lot of people don't really know what to say or don't have a lot of ideas for writing. But if you put a photograph in front of them, they start waxing poetic, or they're able to tell all these details and stuff. And that really helps with the intentionality, at least for each story, is say, okay, here's the photo. This is kind of like the primary jumping point for this, helping people with the intention there. And then the other piece is collaboration. We have done a lot of crazy things over the years trying to, like I said before, we're gathering perspectives from across the generations and across your friends and family and business partners, and trying to like integrate those into a story ourselves. And so the app really makes that so much easier, where you can create a thread and then invite the people that you think have something meaningful to contribute to that piece. And then that can just be automatically programmed in there without having to go through the entire manuscript and find the perfect spot for it.
Yeah, that's cool. So I guess it could be, if we take an example, you have a wedding and you invite a lot of people who have been on the wedding, or who are important to you, to contribute to that piece of your timeline inside of Biograph. Do I
Yes.
understand that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm so looking forward. So before we go deeper into this, tell us, when do you launch the app and where is the app available?
We're launching the app on December 15th, and it'll be available on iOS only at this time, but over time we're adding it to other platforms like Google Play Store. So if you have an iPhone, you'll be able to get it December 15th.
Yeah, looking forward to use it. I'm definitely going to try and test it.
Awesome. Looking forward to your thoughts.
So then you mentioned in our last conversation there are different ways of what you can do with this. One part is, of course, you can have a collaboration with the person using it to build the biography and then write a book after that. That's a bit what we have touched on. It helps you as the user of the platform processing your life and documenting over time, and then they could book the service with you to write the biography. But that's just one of the many use cases. What are other things you can use the platform to?
We're constantly building more services into the app itself so that you can do more stuff with it. And one example right now is, if you want to create a story, we have these postcards, for instance, that you can print out. On the back, you've got your audio transcript. QR code will link into the app so you can hear the audio. You can put it on your refrigerator. You could send it to grandma. You could send it to friends. And that's one way of creating memories, moments at a time. We have a new book feature that we just built, where people can create collaborative books together and print out like a collection of these postcards. And then we still have our high-end service, where if people really want to get deep into the editing process and have specific publishing goals, we're experts in that, so we can help them do so. And one of the newest features is a way to publish or mint your stories on a blockchain. So for instance, instead of making a postcard, you can save it onto Ethereum or Polygon. And the reason for doing that is because we really want people to be the authors of their own stories and to be able to own and control and sell and monetize. And that's huge for us. We never want to be taking advantage of people's data. It's your story, it's your data. Do with it what's best for you. And so it's just really offering people another way to both preserve their story and also publish, share, and or monetize it
Yeah.
as the author.
I have a ton of ideas already from a business perspective. If we start with the postcard, I think it's brilliant. And I guess it's one thing, one service you use inside of the application. So you say, okay, this is the photo with that text, and it goes straight away through the post, and you don't need to touch it again. Or do you need to print it or get it delivered to be able to send it? How does that work?
You can create something right now in real time, and then there's an envelope button. You click it, you type in the address you want to send it to, and boom, it goes out. You can do them like pretty instantaneously. You can also go back and say like, oh, I had a great walk with my mom last spring and her birthday's coming up, and
Yeah.
I just want to send her that voice clip or something for her birthday. And so you can go into the archives and find stuff. It's really cool because you have this whole like memory bank, if you will,
Mm.
of different moments in life that you can do things you never expected or thought that you would. Maybe you're going to make a book, or maybe you're going to just send a Valentine's card or something like that. Once you have all the stuff created, the opportunities are endless.
Yeah. I'm just thinking business for myself. I could send this to my clients. This was the last thing we did together 5 years ago. Was lovely to meet you. Really appreciated the time, and you sent it 5 years after. I think it's huge business effect. Or we doing a podcast and me sending a screenshot after that to you, or whatever. There are tons of opportunities.
Yeah, we actually are working with a handful of businesses, sending out holiday cards and just doing exactly what you said, sharing stories with people in an interesting format. One kind of cool thing for me in doing this business is that we use and grow from all of the tools that we build. We never knew how to make a book. We had to write a story on our own family history. We created that, and kind of from there, people were like, oh, can you do that for us? We started sending out notes to clients and reaching out to them, and other people wanted to do it. And so it's really cool to see like how we can use our own tools to help grow our own business.
It's brilliant. Going further, you mentioned blockchain. I think that's an interesting one because it's a booming market right now, if we not talk about cryptocurrencies. But at least I believe blockchain, AI, and these technologies will change the world. So the ownership and decentralized ownership of what you have created and your stories is huge. If I understood you right, you can take this postcard and say, I want to have this documented in the blockchain, which I believe is called Minted. Can you do this just with the postcard, or can you do it with other things as well?
Right now, within the app, you just have the option to do it with a postcard size story, but we have capabilities of doing larger projects that can happen outside of the app, and we're building more and more features into the app to accommodate that. And a lot of almost everything that we build comes from listening to our own customers and the market in general, and understanding what people want to do. And for instance, I had a call a week ago. Someone was like, I want to create this story. What happens if I want to access this in 40 years and you're not around? And so I said, that's exactly why we have books that are printed, they're tangible, so you can offload it like that. We have an option in the app to download your data, so you can take everything away. It's your story if you want. And also we can save it onto blockchain. And they didn't even know what that necessarily meant, but it's a way for us to help people preserve their story for when we're not available to kind of send them the files.
Yeah, now I believe this is going more and more and growing in importance. Just one of the example we have talked about before, and that's what I'm super interested in. Imagine I take my podcast, which is one of my big memory banks, and I'm documenting my podcast in the blockchain as part of my life story, because a video or an audio track or just the transcript in itself is maybe not today, but maybe in 20 years, it's something that's a lot of worth it. And then you have been contributing to this podcast with this episode, so you could get a piece of that.
Yeah, certainly. Actually, I just had an interview with Mfon Akpan, who you also had on your show a couple of weeks ago. And we published our first ever interview, which was actually recorded on Biograph platform. And it's published on Biograph, but it's also on Ethereum. And so MFON has a copy of that story in his wallet, as do we. And so we are kind of working towards exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's awesome. And is that something people can find online as well if we put a link somewhere?
If
Yeah.
you go to our about page on our website and scroll down to like social media section, there's a link to our OpenSea publications, which is where you can see that interview with MFON.
Yeah. So everyone reach out to AJ and colleagues on www.biograph.book.com, right? If I
Yeah,
read that right.
exactly.
So I think it's something very, very interesting. I love to test that in the future with you guys. And I'm definitely going to download the app on 15th of December. It's
Awesome. Would love to do it.
it's definitely something where I think the world needs more of, because just taking myself, I learned so much from my parents, from people who told stories, but as well reading quite a lot or listening to audio or listening to podcasts. And it's all about stories. And I gave you the example that my dad did radio shows when he lived in Spain. And it's only like 10 minutes radio clips. But my dad passed away last year. So just listening to this, it's still on CDs.
Mm-hmm.
But listening to that, it's awesome because he did this storytelling and it was based on what happened at that moment from a family perspective, though that it was public radio, but it was linking it to how this fits into the wider world context. And it was very specific for that moment, but it was linked to our
Mm-hmm.
family and things that he has experienced. So it's very much when I listen to it, it's like I remember that time, early 2000s, like, holy crap, that's so cool. And it's just
Yeah.
5 minutes audio.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And that's exactly what we're trying to help people do, create more of that, because how important is that in your own life? And think about it if other people had access to that same treasure.
Yeah.
Like that, just 5 minutes of audio is probably one of the most important things that you own.
Yeah. Getting into the last part of the podcast where I'm asking always a couple of questions that are kind of disconnected to what we have talked about, but maybe they are connected in your case. If you could work with a project that is impacting every human being on Earth, what project would you choose to work on and why?
I would say that we are working on exactly what we would want to be working on right now, and helping everybody become an author of their own story and create their own path. And I think there are so many positive outcomes of having people tell their story. And I think that in the spirit of human innovation, the best way to innovate is to, constantly be telling your story with yourself and with other people.
If you could give an advice to a young person that is just getting started with innovation and thinking about how do I change, how do I solve problems in this world, what advice would you give?
I would say start off with a problem that you are passionate about, because there's a lot of stuff that you'll need to do that won't be the most exciting or glamorous. And if you don't have that underlying burning desire to solve the problem, then you're not going to have the stamina or the grit to fight through that. And the second piece of advice would be just do it. I think a lot of people sometimes can get paralyzed by the magnitude of a problem they're facing, or they're daunted by it. And just getting started, taking that first step, then taking the next step, and just continuously going, and realizing that nothing happens overnight. There's no overnight success. It is a series of decisions and efforts, really small things that add up over time. And Jens, I really admire what you're doing with the leadership education and reaching 1 billion people by 2030. That's such an ambitious project, but I think these projects get people really excited. They provide a really clear goal. And also, like, it's very daunting for some people, but I admire that you just do it. Just get started. Start talking to people, start building it out, and you'll eventually get there.
Yeah, to that topic. For me, if you say I want to reach 1,000 people, that's something, yes, you could imagine to do. So for me, it was more, if we truly want to change this world through leadership education, which is the whole thing I do with that business, we need to reach many, many more people than just 1,000 or 2,000 or even 20,000, like the people I could reach within the next 3 years easily. So I have no idea how to do that. That's the most interesting topic. We will figure it out on the go.
I love it. I love it. And to go back to your previous question on what problem could you be solving, I think that we actually are kind of looking at a really similar thing. I think leadership, so much of it, and I love listening to your previous episodes and a lot of really great ideas, but really listening to people, understanding where they're coming from, being able to speak their language, whether we're talking about a technical language or a design language or a totally different culture. Different countries have different ways of thinking about and approaching problems, but really being able to listen to people, understand their stories, empathize with them. And the only way to do that is if people are exchanging back and forth, having dialogue and telling their own stories and not letting other people tell them for you. And so I think a big part of leadership is having a way for people to share stories.
Yeah, agree. And crafting it over time, because it's a changing element. I've had such a amazing career inside of the corporate world, and now doing other things on top of that. It's kind of rewriting your story on the go, which is also a fascinating thing.
Mm-hmm.
AJ, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, and it was a pleasure to have you. Where can people find you, and how can people reach out to you?
You can find us on our website, biographbook.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, AJ Greenberg. That's probably my primary platform outside of Biograph. And we're on all the other social channels.
Yeah.
Would love to hear from anyone. And Jens, this has been an honor. Really appreciate you having me on the show.
It's a pleasure. I'm really eager to test the app. So everyone, whenever you listen to this, most probably after the 15th of December, go to the App Store and check it out and let us know. Reach out to me what you think. Reach out to AJ straight away. And AJ, maybe we do a second version of that in the future when it's out, to see how people can use it and how people use it on the go. Would love to figure that out in the future.
Absolutely. Would love to keep the conversation going.
Yeah, definitely. AJ, thank you very much for the show. It was a pleasure. Looking forward to the 15th of December.
Thank you, Jens. Appreciate it.